All right, let's bring in tonight's political panel, National Senate Leader Bridget McKenzie and Labor MP for Parramatta Andrew Charlton. Welcome to you both. Bridget, news today that Qantas Chairman Richard Goyder will be stepping down. Do you think this is going to make a noticeable difference?
Well, it absolutely will. The share market will be watching Mr Goyder's move. He's obviously got a lot of experience, but the share price has been going in the wrong direction as a result of not just his leadership, the board more generally, and particularly the former CEO, Alan Joyce. Qantas needs to restore its reputation to its loyal customers, its staff, its shareholders and the broader public. We need a smooth transition of board and management positions to actually restore that reputation so Qantas can once again be an airline all Australians can be proud of.
I mean, Andrew, Alan Joyce as CEO, he got a lot of the blame publicly for all of Qantas's many failings this year. But do you think Richard Goyder is just as much to blame?
Well, ultimately, Richard Goyder and the board are accountable to Qantas's owners and investors. And that's why Mr Goyder has announced his retirement today and that retirement will take effect next year. I think Mr Goyder is trying to get a balance between accountability for Qantas's mistakes and also providing stability at a time when Qantas has already had its CEO depart and some other senior leaders leave the business. So I think that's what's behind the announcement today of a retirement announced now but not taking effect for another year.
All right, let's talk about The Voice. It's quite amazing that we've got to this point. It's Wednesday. The Voice referendum is on Saturday, 3 days out. According to the Resolve strategic poll for the Sydney Morning Herald, support for The Voice among Indigenous groups has fallen. But according to this poll, it is still in the majority. Apparently, it's 59% are in favour. Bridget, this is much lower than the Prime Minister's often quoted 80%.
Exactly. I mean, so I'm not going to commentate on the Prime Minister's statistics that he's using. I can tell you I've been on pre-poll today, up and down Wodonga Main Street in my no T-shirt and getting a lot of quiet nods from a whole spectrum of local community members here in regional Victoria. So I do think whether it's the Indigenous Australians voting figures or more broadly, the fall of support for The Voice is because people haven't been able to understand, the government's been unwilling to explain, and Australians are rightfully, quietly, in their own respectful way, saying no right across the board. And that's just been my experience out on the booths today.
What about in your area? You're in Parramatta in Western Sydney, Andrew. I mean, obviously you've been out door knocking. What's your sense on the ground? Are you also getting a lot of people saying, no, not interested?
Look, first of all, let me just address your question to Bridget. It is absolutely wrong and disingenuous to suggest that Indigenous people do not support The Voice to Parliament. Indigenous people supported The Voice to Parliament right through the Uluru dialogues, which involved more than 1,000 Indigenous people leading up to the Uluru Statement, which endorsed.
There's more than
1,000
Indigenous Australians in the country. Sorry,
but Andrew, this is a Sydney Morning Herald. Go ahead, Andrew.
Sorry, you're going to let me finish, Bridget. Secondly, it's also been supported by major Indigenous organisations, including the Northern Territory Land Council, the Kimberley Land Council, and many others. Thirdly, any of the published polls you look at show strong majority support for The Voice to Parliament. So whichever way you cut this, Indigenous people are positive and support The Voice, and it's disingenuous to suggest anything else.
So do you think this poll is wrong? Because this is a poll in the Sydney Morning Herald that says it is still a majority, but they're saying around only 59% of Indigenous Australians plan to vote yes.
Well, polls go up and down, but whether it's 59% or 80%, it is a strong majority of Indigenous people that support The Voice. I'm not going to put any particular weight or opposition on any individual poll, but there is no question that across the history of this proposition, including today, Indigenous people strongly support The Voice to Parliament.
Yeah. What do you think, if it does fail, as the polls are pointing to, Bridget, do you think the opposition is going to start to put pressure on the Prime Minister and blame him for this and claim that he's divided the country?
Well, Sharri, he has.
Well, first of all,
I mean, the Karma Langton report outlined a whole process to get to a voice, and it didn't include going to a referendum before regional voices were set up and local voices, etc. And that there had been time and process and a coming together and an agreement of the broader Australian public. Instead, Albo and his ego drove us to this referendum within the first term of his parliamentary prime ministership, and it's been a disaster on the ground. It has divided our country, and I'm someone that's tried to participate in this debate very respectfully as someone that is absolutely committed to reconciliation.
Yeah,
but
all right.
How this has been conducted on both sides has been appalling.
All right, Andrew Charlton, Bridget McKenzie, I apologise. We had breaking news tonight, so we are now out of time, but thank you both so much for joining me.